Hey there, it's Claudia, host of CityCast Portland. If you've been listening to the show this week, you've probably heard a few mentions of our new membership program. So I just want to take the time to thank all of you who have joined this week. Aside from seeing that our hard work actually matters to so many of you, it's also been wonderful reading all the notes coming through saying why you're supporting us. So I figured instead of hearing me listing all the reasons why you should become a founding member of CityCast Portland, I just let our listeners do it. Here's why Emily G joined the membership program. She wrote, "Between working from home and parenting, I often don't feel as engaged in city life as I'd like. This podcast helps me feel more connected and encourages me to get out more. I'm grateful I found it and I'm happy to support." Melanie CK said, "I just moved in June of 2023, and this newsletter and podcast has really shaped my experiences here. Most predominantly the restaurant reviews and suggestions, but honestly, I love all of it and was willing to pay for something that has enhanced my experience and welcome to Portland." Aw, thanks, Melanie. Glad to have you in town. And finally, John's mom had this to say. "Yeah, our executive producer's mom, Susan Natariani. I want to support your team's intelligent and thoughtful analysis of topics, but I also enjoy your irreverence. I listen when I walk, so I probably look like a crazy lady when I'm laughing. You have some very interesting episodes, like the recent one about the Lovejoy columns. Plus, I would have never thought to get a great dive bar burger last time I visited if I wouldn't have heard the dive bar episode. Also, Rachel's newsletter has very interesting stories." Y'all, this woman doesn't even live here and she's throwing down. So if any of what you're hearing resonates with you, head over to portland.citycast.fm and become a member today. If you join before March 8th, you'll get founding member status and your name will go up on our site, listed as such, for eternity, which is pretty baller. Okay, well, no matter what, thank you so much for listening. On to our interview with Commissioner Carmen Rubio. In recent months, you might have noticed that Portland City Commissioner Carmen Rubio has been making headlines for offering a lifeline to several struggling city bureaus, thanks to a new revenue source, the Portland Clean Energy Fund, or PCEF. This was a tax on retailers intended to invest in climate projects that benefited disadvantaged communities of color who are being hardest hit in our ongoing climate change. But some are critical of the creative use of the funds, saying it's not centering the intended spirit of the program. So today on CityCast Portland, we're talking with mayoral hopeful Commissioner Carmen Rubio about her seemingly endless bag of money, and also to dig deeper into some of these gambits and what they tell us about how she might lead the city in an even bigger job. It's Thursday, February 29th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. You know, you recently told Willamette Week's Sophie Peel that you're an introvert and you're no drama. And we brought this up before actually on the show, that everyone else in city council, aside from you, seems to be constantly making headlines, which is like not always a good thing. But now that your bureaus and projects are making these like visibly big moves, your name is coming up a lot more. And to a lot of people, I think this might be their first introduction in a weird way. And, you know, even though you've been doing organizing and leading organizations for decades now. So we have a question to get to know you a little bit better.
Sure.
So there's this popular children's cartoon called Avatar: The Last Airbender. It just had this live action world premiere on Netflix, which is a big deal to a lot of nerds like me. So it's like in front of mine. In this world, there are people who could manipulate or bend all four elements. You know, so you have water benders who, you know, they like are able to make ice and do crazy stuff with water. And then there's earth benders who literally can move earth. There's air benders that can like almost fly a little bit and make gusts of wind and all that. And then there's firebenders, which is pretty explanatory. They manipulate fire. So if you were able to choose any of those elements, if you were able to like be any of those benders, what would you want to be?
That's a really good question. I think for me, I think it would probably be water or earth.
Why?
I think water because water is fungible. It is like flexible. It can be solid and it can be liquid. And you need water in a lot of things to make them happen. So I think I love the fluid nature of water. Close second would be the earth, I think, because building and it's malleable and it's sort of the source of all creation in some
Hmm.
ways. So in that way, I think you need earth in everything. You need certain elements or certain values in everything that you're going to do as a baseline. So those are very hard for me to choose between, but I would say those are the top two for sure.
Cool, cool. Waterbenders are also healers, FYI. So,
Mm.
well, I'll let you pick two. I did say one, but
Okay,
you're
water
my
first.
okay.
Water's
Water. Okay, you heard it here first. Carmen Rubio would be a waterbender. Well, another thing that we've talked about on the show is kind of jokingly like your magic pot of money. As the city's planning and sustainability commissioner, you've overseen millions of dollars coming into the Portland Clean Energy Fund. And as of late, you've been using it to bail out other city bureaus in needs of funds. Those are our words, by the way. Like, how did you prioritize how to use those resources?
Well, I think the baseline issue with the Clean Energy Fund is making sure that we're staying true to its intent and true to its value.
Hmm.
And because we had revenue that went well above projection, so this is sort of a one-off, right?
Hmm.
We have this opportunity to really align the work that is happening in the city that actually should be centering those frontline communities and BIPOC communities as well, and that it's meeting the criteria of the Clean Energy Fund very, very specifically.
Hmm.
And so, in that way, I don't feel like it's a backfill, or that's not the intention. I think it's an opportunity to
Hmm.
really push the city into culture change about how we assess programs, who we center in our programs. So I feel like it's a real opportunity to change the way the city does business and center the right things.
Right. Well, let's go through a few of these funding decisions in detail. Like the largest being 112 million for the Bureau of Transportation or PBOT. That's one of Commissioner Mingus Maps bureaus. Now, how did that come about? Because I mean, like let's also address that they're in a budget deficit
Yes.
of 32 million.
Yes.
So, when you gave them 112, I was just like part of me was just like, well, they're set for a while now, right? Like why are they still it still seems like they're struggling. So
Yes.
part of me wonders why is P-ball still coming at us with parking tickets? You know what I mean? Like why are they still trying to like look underneath the couch seats for money?
Yeah. In terms of how things were assessed, really, it was not a discussion among elected officials.
Okay.
It needed to happen at a bureau level to actually get down to business and take any one elected's, own priorities or positioning out of it. So in that way, it was a very good, clear process among um, colleagues, at
Hmm.
the bureau level, with Donnie Oliveira, the director of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, sort of leading the conversation. He knows the fund, he knows the clear parameters of the fund, at least initially, so that in their conversations, he could help bureau directors and their teams really assess what things could meet the criteria and what things were clearly off the table so that they could get their requests ready to take them before the PSF committee, because that's an important step that needs to happen. Anything we put on the table needs to go to the PSF committee regardless before it comes to council. So that's how things were prioritized. It wasn't Mingus Maps. It wasn't Carmen Rubio. It wasn't, Ted Wheel. It wasn't any of us. It was really, truly assessing what are the big, needs out there that may be potentially at risk that are already have demonstrated a strong community benefit and that meet these clear priorities outlined in PSF.
Yeah. And whose idea was that? Like who was just like, "Oh, hey, we have this fund. We're able to do that." Was it just the bureau itself?
It was the work of me together with my bureau leadership. We were in conversations about that. We learned about the potential surplus that might be happening. Although we didn't have a final number at that point, we decided that it would be prudent for us to really get things ready in the event that we were met with a situation like that came to pass. The
Yeah.
second piece of that you asked was about PBOT. And I think that PBOT has its own clear structural deficit, right?
Right.
Has its own problems that, in a time where we're aiming for a just transition and we are really trying to step down our GHGs and also our footprint, and also dial down our reliance on fossil fuels and moving away from cars, that use that kind of fuel. Our revenues are going to start declining from natural
Yeah.
sources that used to fund that were the norm. And so that, together with other things around the state, I think it makes it more challenging, and more what's the word, urgent.
What are GHGs?
Greenhouse gas emissions.
Ah,
Yeah,
greenhouse
sorry.
gas. Sorry. Well, I mean, I know you guys are so used to this stuff, but I don't know
I'm
anything.
sorry. Yes.
No. Yeah. Also, just a few weeks ago, you talked about bailing out Portland Street Response, which Commissioner Renee Gonzalez had expressed openness to cutting. And you're basically proposing, talking about PBOD and Commissioner Mingus's bureaus, you're proposing funding other departments that other city commissioners are in charge of. Did you at all ever worry about it looking like you were overstepping?
That is a very good observation, because I think that you have hit one of the major challenges in this form of government. That we each have, our own bureaus that we have been assigned by the mayor. And
Hmm.
so sometimes it feels like, are we stepping our toes to call out another issue in another bureau, or how do we do that? Typically, we do that with, working with the commissioners, or the mayor, depending on the bureau. So that it's not a need to do those things. But in terms of when we're talking about deficits, I think that most people are eager to collaborate to figure
Yeah.
things out. However, I mean, in terms of PSR, for me too, I have been interested in seeing and giving the space needed to see if there were going to be some solutions that were coming forward. And when I did not hear that, and we're moving closer and closer to certain deadlines in our budget, process, I felt like it was necessary to put ideas on the table, and that's
Right.
what I feel like I'm elected to do. It may be a good idea or a bad idea that we're still checking out, but nevertheless, I think it was really important to signal that it's an important thing to me. It's an important thing to the community, and the community
Portland
was
Street
waiting for us.
Response.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Portland Street Response, and it was very important, I think, for folks to hear that we're trying to figure it out. And so
Hmm.
that was where I was coming from with that, and
Hmm.
hopefully it landed fine with my colleagues.
How is that looking, by the way?
We're asking our city attorneys and our finance folks to take a look at it to see what's possible and what isn't possible. So
Hmm.
I don't have an answer for that yet, but we are definitely digging in. And when I have news, we'll share either way. But regardless, if that's the way that we're able to fund it, or if it's not, I'm still going to be strongly advocating for its full funding.
Yeah. You know, we've been talking about the Clean Energy Fund and how, you and the Bureau have been able to find ways to expand the scope of funding or the scope of what this money can do. And as you've said, and the committee overseeing the fund has gone on record saying all the allocations fit the purview of the objective, But are you comfortable about setting this precedent with this large pot of money? Like, just imagine how someone who's less aligned with your values might choose to allocate those resources.
No, it's a really good question, and it's one I've thought about quite a lot, because from day one, I felt a deep responsibility to ensuring that this fund meets its mission, and it meets its intent, and that it's moving us in a direction where we're actually making and seeing progress. You know, some things are always, we have to assess the risks, and that is certainly a risk. Anything is a precedent when you could be setting precedent when you try something new or you propose something new. And at the same time, I will be frank that if I'm not putting ideas out that have like the values that I care about, I'm not sure that they will be put out at all. If and there other people will be making those decisions.
Mhm.
Those ideas are going to come from other places, whether I put them on the table or not. And I want to make sure there are at least ideas on the table that are squarely centered in our values.
All of this does make you seem like a hero swooping in and solving everyone's budget issues, but this fund just kind of came in with your jurisdiction. It kind of fell in your lap, right?
That's
Is
right.
this a cheat code? Did you get a cheat code? If this were a video game, I'd be like, Carmen's cheating.
I think it's probably serendipity is how I would call it,
Okay.
because I happen to feel very deeply aligned with the values of the fund and very protective of the fund. And I happen to be assigned this portfolio. If you would ask me, did I ever think that it would become such a big part of the work? No, I had no
Mhm.
idea. I did not ask for planning and sustainability. It was assigned to me. And so I asked for housing actually in my first,
Oh,
but
interesting.
I'm very grateful for it. And I've learned a lot in the Bureau. Both about the massive work that our city needs to still undertake to make progress on our climate goals, and
Mhm.
also the equally massive work that the city needs to undertake within to make sure that we have the capacity to center the right values in the right communities that are most vulnerable in that work. So, in that way, it's taught me so much, and I just feel really honored to be able to be a part of this great work.
All right, well, let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, why does the city need so much financial bailing out in the first place? How do you think the city's budgeting process is not working right now? And how would you change it when you aren't in charge of this pot of money? Because I mean, it was just like you said, it was serendipity, not just that you were able to, help guide, but also that it even existed. So it was kind of just like, oh, phew, for so many bureaus, you know?
Yeah, and I also want to really be clear too that this is only a one-time surplus.
Yeah, but like as you stated, this is a one-time thing. And the city was lucky that it had that. So it's clear that our budgeting process isn't quite working. Does that make sense?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're
Yeah.
meaning we don't have enough revenue in the budget.
Yeah.
What That is true. We're in a place of declining revenue
Mhm.
right now as a city, and that is a very very uncomfortable and scary place to be, especially with things that are not in our purview to control that are really driving a strong impact on that revenue, like interest rates, right, that are
Mhm.
extremely high, like the fact that we are in a time where we have a housing shortage, yet we don't have a lot of investment coming into the city right now, so our issuing folks that are applying for permits to build are even lower. That has an impact on our ability to fund certain bureaus that depend on the revenue that come into the city to actually
Right.
hire people, keep people in their jobs, and performing services for the community. So it's all this ecosystem, and it's also about hydraulics, right? And so yeah, when what we're finding those structural deficits that are really be feeling crystallized and exacerbated in a very visible way right now.
Are you able to
And
speak
so
about any of those points
sure.
of weakness where you're just like, "Oh, here's what's not working and this is why we can't stay within budget."
Yes, something that we've been talking about quite a lot lately, in fact, multiple times today, is our permitting system.
Mhm.
And as I was mentioning before, we right now in this commission form of government, we have a permitting system where, if you pull permits to do a project, whether it's, any kind of project that's building commercial or residential, or an improvement on your property, you have to go sometimes through multiple bureaus, at least
Oh,
seven,
yeah. Yeah.
and it can take a long time. And in this time of high interest rates, supply chain issues, and navigating through the system, time is money, and so you
Mhm.
can literally be on on the verge of running out of money for your project while you're waiting for permits to happen, right? And
Gotcha.
so we have this historically slow system.
Hmm.
But at the same time, our permitting process is dependent on those revenues coming in from those permits to actually self sustain.
Right.
So you can see how, like, when we're in a hard time, like right now, we have less revenue, we have less ability then to hold on to critical staff that make the process go faster. So that's an example of a structural problem that thankfully we're rectifying now, but we're rectifying it, while it's in crisis, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do. We will have to look at those structural areas that just no longer work in this time. And we have
Hmm.
to recalibrate it and be realistic about what we can fund, what we can't fund. Look for those areas of alignment. And certainly with the city manager coming in, we're going to have a lot of opportunity to figure out those places where we can narrow the gap, maybe
Hmm.
save some time, and also make things easier for the everyday Portlander that wants to use our services.
Yeah, I can speak from experience that you have to go through like 3 to 4 bureaus if you want to get a permit to even just like, oh, I want a driveway. You're like, you have to go to PBOT, you
Yeah,
have to go to this, you have to you have to go so many
it's
places.
a nightmare.
Yeah. Well, do you think that's going to change at all once the charter is enacted?
It's not going to change overnight.
Hmm.
It's going to be a process of planning over multiple years, and we have started the process around just this one discrete project of the permitting functions.
Hmm.
That's coming into alignment, and we're already building a plan together. But what has previously inhibited all of us from doing things or getting things into alignment is the commission form of government. So it's going to be like tremendously helpful, the
Hmm.
change, so that we can get things more aligned, because we will have one point of authority. We don't have to go to 3 or 4 different commissioners to sign off on a structural
Right.
change, because you can see then how that would gridlock, and in some cases,
Yeah.
as we've seen, never happen. And then
Yeah.
the deficit perpetuates over time, and then we have these big challenges and crises. So it will get better. It'll make it easier to make decisions more quickly about these things.
Hmm.
That's what the government change will bring.
And now, I mean, all of this kind of circles back if we're just like, well, why are you guys running out of money? It's like, yeah, there's just a lot of standing still,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes.
This next question was actually suggested by a listener, and it has to do with housing. I remember you said that you were hoping to get the Housing Bureau. Our listener, John L., asks, what's one audacious idea that you'd like to see for addressing the housing crisis?
Oof. One audacious idea. I have a couple. Well, one of them would definitely be doing a demonstration project in the downtown core for one of these buildings that are no longer being used, and
Hmm.
converting it to housing. We passed some policies to make office to housing conversion easier,
Right.
but they're still pretty expensive to do. So my dream would be to have a demonstration project where we can show how it can be done, um, and having it be a project that is in partnership with the state, with the private sector, and really just being a showcase for, hitting all the notes of activation in our downtown core, repurposing it for housing, which is something we absolutely need to do. It's a new time. Hybrid work is here to stay. And so we need that vibrancy and vitality into our downtown core. So let's make it affordable for people to live downtown and
Yeah.
create community here. The other idea I have is I've been really looking at and watching how other cities and other communities are exploring avenues about more green housing technology,
Hmm.
with like the mass timber is one of them. And also, there was another one where it's like prefabricated pieces that make it easier and really sustainable ways of building homes quickly and affordably. And so I'm interested in looking at that. I don't know enough about it yet to really propose anything, but I feel like if there are ways that we could scale some rapid production of some of these, very sustainable ways to create some homes, together with pairing it with We recently did a buildable land inventory at the city, and figuring out how we pair that with available land. It's a way to keep costs really low and make it really accessible for people to either buy their first homes or for renters, not only for affordable housing, but also for working people and young people who want to live in the city, and
Mm-hmm.
want to live and work here.
Right. I just want to say to add to your mass timber comment, it's a type of construction, mass timber construction, and it's in contrast to the light frame wood construction. So it's using engineered wood products, like larger solid wood panels, and also like manufactured off-site stuff. So it's almost like manufactured housing in a way, and it actually uses a smaller footprint. So I can see why that would be something to look into.
Yeah.
So, elephant in the room, you and Commissioner Maps and Commissioner Gonzalez are all running for mayor while still working together in this like pre-charter, state of government, all ending your terms in city council. So, how awkward is it? I'm kidding.
I love that you're asking that because nobody asks that. And I know everybody's thinking it.
Yeah.
It's not, for me, oddly, it's not awkward at all. I can't speak for my other colleagues. However, I can maybe say with confidence, I sit right next to Commissioner Maps, and he and I are very jovial, and we've actually talked about it, and we're pretty lighthearted about it all. So I feel like we're good. I mean, but yeah, other folks you would probably have to ask them directly. But for me, it's such an honor to even be in these places, and I'm so cognizant of what it takes for someone. I say this with humility, like I recognize the role, and I feel honored to be in this, even to be right here, and I have privilege enough to be in a seat. I have privilege enough to be able to run for mayor, and I think about in my worst days where I'm feeling grumpy or I'm sensitive to something that I read or that someone said about me, or that sometimes pulling things, the knives out of your back, whatever. Like in my worst days, it's never as bad as what some of our ancestors have experienced. And so
Yeah.
that gives me perspective and it grounds me. And so I have no choice but to be lighthearted about it, because it's a privilege to be here. We shouldn't be squandering it with unnecessary drama and in behavior.
Right, right. So before you head out, is there anything you'd like to add?
Maybe just that, I think charter change and the government change we're in a really historic moment, and it's really exciting and really consequential, and it really matters this election. And because the folks that will be elected in this next, year, they're going to set the tone for the city for a generation.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to shape our city for the next generation. They're going to also hire the leadership that is going to put in practice and operationalize the policies. So we need to make sure that it is absolutely representative of who Portland is today.
Well, Commissioner Rubio, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us and, explaining how all this stuff is working, because we speculate every week, every Friday, every Tuesday and Friday, we have a speculation party. So it's so nice to actually have like someone who's in those rooms come in and tell us what's going on. So thank you.
Oh, it's my honor to be here. And like I said, I'm a fan, and anytime you can have me on, and I will tell you everything that's going on.
The day after we spoke to Commissioner Rubio, the Oregonian published an article relaying some of the criticisms about the Portland Clean Energy Fund, or PCEF, bailing city bureaus and funding projects that seem off base with its climate justice focus. So we reached out to Commissioner Rubio for comment on some of these concerns, and this is what she had to say. These projects, just like any other PSEF-funded projects, will go before the PSEF committee for consideration before its recommendations come to City Council. City bureaus know that their climate projects must demonstrate eligibility and alignment with the city's official climate emergency work plan, and that they will be publicly and transparently held to the same reporting requirements as others. Bureaus should be held to high standards when it comes to authentically serving frontline and Black, Indigenous, Latine, and other communities of color. There must be a clear community benefit and ensuring we are moving toward a future with zero emissions and building a climate resilient city. Otherwise, they should not be considered for funding. Also, just know that I asked specifically about two of the projects the Oregonian pointed out, which would allocate $28 million for a climate resilient future Keller Auditorium and $20 million for a climate friendly infrastructure for the Fire Bureau. So Commissioner Rubio responded specifically to that question by saying, "These projects are two of the 5 strategic investments I proposed as part of the second allocation for unanticipated PSEF revenue late last year. The PSEF committee is designing a process for those remaining funds. It will meet tonight and announce what it comes up with in the coming weeks. Any project ideas will be subject to that process, after which the committee will bring its recommendations to council." So that means that they met up on Wednesday night. So we'll report anything that shook out from that in tomorrow's Friday Roundup if there's anything to report. Thanks again to Commissioner Rubio for getting back to us so quickly. We appreciate the transparency. Well, that's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.